Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Voting 101, a panel discussion brought to you by the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Dakota District Council. We're so excited to have you joining us this evening, and we have a very special guest with us. Of course, all of our guests are special guests, but we have a special guest that is outside of our council that is here joining us, Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon. So welcome, Secretary.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be with you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for being here. So before I introduce our amazing panelists, I'm going to pass it over to our leader, Bishop Richard D. Howe Jr., who is our diocesan of the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Dakota District Council. And I'll turn it over to him for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Sierra, and God bless all of you tonight. We are really excited for tonight's conversation on voting. And for the MWWDC, this is not a new subject for us, but it is a fresher subject for all of us due to the fact that the election time is next month. And we're excited to have our Secretary of State of Minnesota to be with us, Secretary Steve Simon. We're looking for a great conversation with he and all of our panelists around this table tonight. MWWDC, we love you to life. Thank you very, very much. If you have any questions, I'm certainly that our moderator will direct your attention how you can ask those wonderful PAW, MWDDC questions all the way from Minnesota, Wisconsin, South, and North Dakota. May God bless you, and thank you again. Thank you so much for joining in tonight.
Awesome. And then before we go into our panelists, our chairman, Bishop David E. Johnson, do you have any opening remarks?
We just say praise the Lord and welcome to everyone that's viewing. We ask that you would just take the time to share this with a neighbor and with a friend. And we welcome all as we look to march souls to the polls here in the coming weeks, preparing for November's election and to educate each and every one of you. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to having a great conversation. And thank you to our guest today, Secretary Simon. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. So in hopes for you to understand the nuances of voting this year, Secretary Steve Simon will answer some questions about the voting process. We will also hear from our spiritual and community leaders about the role of the believer, aka the Christian, in voting this election season as well. So please understand that this conversation will be useful information for everyone, okay? Not just for Christians, not just for believers, but for everyone, regardless of what your spiritual background may be. So feel free to share this live with everybody, okay? Hit the share button. And also we ask that you show us some love too. So hit those hearts, hit those likes. If we say something that you agree with or that you like, show us some love, okay? Let us know that you're with us, all right? So this virtual world is it's something to get used to. So let us feel that you're with us and that you're connecting with us as well. And of course, if you have questions, we have a plethora of questions that we have prepared that we've kind of heard circulating in community that we have prepared for tonight's panel. But if you do have questions that we don't necessarily get to or that is pressing on your heart, please leave those questions in the comment box and we'll make sure that we get to those. All right. Awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this dynamic panel. I'm super excited to have each and every one of them here. As you see, I just lit up. So as I've already mentioned, we have our diocesan bishop, Richard D. Howe Jr. He is the pastor of Shiloh Temple International Ministries in North Minneapolis. Shout out to North Minneapolis. You know, I don't charge it to your heart, Bishop. I'm in St. Paul, but hey, So shout out to North Minneapolis. We also have on our call, we have our chairman, as I mentioned before, Bishop David E. Johnson, who is the pastor of Grace Apostolic Church, which is in Minnetonka, and he is doing a fabulous job in our council. We thank him so much for being here. And we also have, I tell you, she's one of my favorites, Minister Tawana Black. Many of you just know her as Tawana Black, the powerhouse CEO that we just love. I tell you, I met her, a couple years ago, and I'm like, who is this woman? She is, oh my goodness, I want to be like her. Anyways, so she's awesome. She's the CEO of the Center for Economic Inclusion. She does a lot of great work. And then also this powerhouse of a woman as well. Everyone is a powerhouse on here. This powerhouse of a woman, she is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Lady Erica Young. She has done great work in our communities in Wisconsin and also in our council with our churches and in ministry. She's in school right now to be an attorney. So God bless her, because Woo! So we'll get into a little bit more of her background as well when it comes to community and government and so on and so forth. And of course, last but certainly not least, our Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon. And we're going to get into what he does and what his office does and all that great stuff. All right. I think I'm done talking. I think I need a glass of water, but let's go ahead and jump into what we're all here for. All right. So as we're opening up, I want to go ahead and direct this first question to Secretary of State Steve Simon. So for those that are unfamiliar with the duties and responsibility of the Secretary of State, can you explain to us exactly what your role is and what your office does and how it directly impacts Minnesotans?
Yes. So thank you again for having me. I really, really appreciate it. So I wear a bunch of hats in this job. One hat I wear and one responsibility has to do with businesses. So when you file a business in the state of Minnesota, you got to call it something. You got to file somewhere. Are you ABC Incorporated or XYZ company or whatever? That goes on through our office. We're kind of the welcome mat for businesses and a lot of related commercial documents as well through the life of a business that we handle and file and try to make smoother. The second major component of our office is something called the Safe at Home program, Safe at Home. The Safe at Home program is an address confidentiality program for victims of domestic violence, stalking, others who fear for their physical safety or for the safety of their family. And those in the program get to have their true physical home address a secret, totally secret for all purposes, private, public, whether you're dealing with a bank, a school, a retailer, whatever. And only we and they know where they live. We get them their mail. We help them get on their feet. It's really gratifying work. But there's no question that the responsibility of the office that gets the most attention, particularly now in a year like this, at a time like this, is the elections function. We serve as the chief elections administrator in the state of Minnesota. So what does that mean? Here's what it doesn't mean. We don't count any votes, ever. We never do, probably never will. We don't hire any of the folks you see in the polling place, those election judges. We don't do that. We don't, we don't buy any of the elections equipment, the tabulating equipment. All that stuff happens at the local level in counties and cities. What we do is we do all the policy work at the legislature and in other forums. We report the results on election night and then certify them. We do all the certification of the elections equipment. We issue rules and regulations and guidance, and we sort of knit together that whole program. So that's what we do. So as a result of that, I like to say that we're in the democracy business. And it is a heck of a time to be in the democracy business, especially now 33 days out from a really, really important election. That's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Where did your passion come from for even, wanting to run to be our Secretary of State? Where did that come from?
I'll tell you what, elections issues are everybody issues, okay? It's not just an election issues. They're connected to everything. Whatever issue or issues you care about the most in life, whether it's jobs or schools or roads or social justice or anything else, so much depends on making sure you've got people who share your views and values who get elected to stuff. Now, I know there are many ways to make change, many ways, but everyone has to admit that a really, really big way is making sure you get people in office who are going to do the right thing, because people get elected to offices, I don't care what it is, President of the United States, school board, governor, you name it. And what they do or fail to do once they get there has real downstream effects on every one of us. So that's kind of the theoretical approach. Part of it's personal with me, okay? My great-grandparents fled to this country. I don't say they immigrated, they fled. They got out of there. They were from Eastern Europe where they faced oppression, economic exclusion, violence, and they fled. And they came to this country. And one of the reasons they fled, there were many, was they didn't have a say over who governed them or how. There was no election. There was no voice for them and their families. So they came over here and they found that. And they in particular found a voice, and their voice was their vote. So I take that very seriously because that's kind of in my blood. That's in my DNA. And that's my mission. My mission in this office is pretty simple. You can put it on a bumper sticker, not hard at all. My mission is to make it as easy as possible for every eligible voter to vote. Period. That's it. No mystery. No big explanation. That's it.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. And I think that we are in agreement that that's what we're all, in this for as well. So we stand with you with that mission. So my next questions are going to be directed to Bishop Howell. So for those on here that are believers, that are Christians, why should the believer vote this election?
To have for all of us. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. Jesus said, render unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. And it seems like in many of our Christian wonderful circles, that many people think that we only render unto Jesus and forget about the things that are rendered unto Jesus, but not unto God and Jesus. And so we're really in a different time in that I think education is very necessary for us to realize and appreciate what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 did for all of us. Our council is predominantly Black. And I think that also times that we don't appreciate the hard work that those that carried the torch for 1965 to become a reality, which was a landmark piece of federal legislation in the United States that prohibited racial discrimination in voting. This was a very key piece of legislation that I think that we need to appreciate and give him. Unfortunately, in many of our Christian circles, voting is so apathetic among so many of us, and how we need to make it understood that Jesus wants us to vote. This is not just a social thing. This is a theocracy. It is theological. And I think that if we understand, I wish we could have added an 11th commandment after thou shalt not covet. We should have put an 11th commandment, and thou shalt not stay home and not vote. Come on, somebody. Amen. Because that's how important it is for us in this 21st century.
Awesome. Amen. So we're gonna that's Bishop Richard D. Howe's theology there too. But hey, I'm thinking about that. I'm with you on that. Also, what's your vision for our council regarding our participation civically in Minnesota and nationally? Like, what is your vision for our council? For those that are part of our churches, what's your vision?
Well, certainly, I want us all to vote. There's no question about it. From Minnesota, Wisconsin, South to North Dakota, it is our responsibility to vote. Now, listen carefully. We love to complain when things are not going well. And many of us have an idea what things and how the government should be ran, how districts, communities, villages, etc. But what good is your voice if you don't vote? And here is an opportunity for us as citizens of the body of Christ to finally vote our conscience across this 4-state area. I can't emphasize enough that it's so much easier for us to find fault with all kinds of systems. But that is the reason why we know the issues, understand what the issues are, and vote our conscience against or pro those issues. I think that this is a time now for us to be more conscientious and prayerful as we go. So for the responsibility across these states, 4 states, and our churches, it must be an idea that time has come for us to vote our conscience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's, as we're thinking about how and why we're being civically engaged, and this is a question that I'm going to direct to Minister Tawana Black. What are some ways that our communities can stay civically engaged? I know oftentimes people think that the only way is to vote, which is the main one, right? But what are some other ways that individuals can stay civically engaged and allow their voices to be heard?
Well, first, I want to say thank you for being able to host this, and thank you to Secretary Simon for engaging with us in this conversation tonight. I think we've seen our leaders show the perfect example for us just over the last several months, and even predating that time, as being civically engaged out alongside our people. So being out, being active at times of crisis. Sometimes that means marching in order to show our leaders that we mean business, right? That it's time for us to take a stand in community. Other times that means being able to rally people to the polls, being sure that we're registering people to vote, making sure that those people who are registered to vote, but who may need to have the knowledge about how to vote and where to vote, have that information. but other times it may also be about making sure that we're all aware of the policies. While certainly the national election is consuming a lot of information and a lot of time right now, local elections have major impacts on our everyday lives. And sometimes we are less informed about who represents us on our school boards, on our city councils, on Met Council, on our county commissions and boards, and we don't always know who those individuals are. So as church leaders, as ministry leaders, as Sunday school teachers, it behooves us to make sure that we're taking the time to get to know those leaders, to hold them accountable, to welcome them into our flock and build relationships so that when we need to take action, that isn't the first time that they're getting to know us, but that they really have deep relationships with us and know that they're accountable to us because, as Bishop Powell said, we have cast our vote, right? And we are certainly dues-paying, tax-paying citizens who have every right and responsibility to be able to ensure that they hold themselves accountable back to us and back to our communities because we have a voice there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to open this up also to Bishop Johnson and Lady Erica. Would you like to chime in as well on other ways that, or echo other ways that folks can stay civically engaged and why it's so important to stay civically engaged?
Well, I think it's very important to be civically engaged, and as we really encourage one another, the work that has been done. I really want to talk as I answer this question from my heart, as my sleeves have been rolled up and my hands have been dirty in the work for quite some time. But voting not only for this election, but in every election that we have, but specifically for this one, carries a weight of transformation and change to a point in place where our democracy could be on the brink of being challenged and pulled underneath from us. I'm encouraging and pushing all as I speak to why we should vote, as I speak to what we can do from a civic engagement perspective. I know for a fact that because of COVID-19, we are yet challenged with most baby boomers whom normally hold down the polls and polling locations. We are normally walking into polling locations where we see those that are 55, 65 and up that are maintaining and holding down these polling election sites. But because of COVID-19, they're choosing to stay home for health risk and health concerns. But we, those of us that are the Gen Xers and millennials, can get involved and mandating and helping out and serving in these capacities, in addition to getting individuals on your block, in your community, in your family, in your neighborhood to get out and vote.
Absolutely. Lady Young?
First, thank you. First, I'd also like to thank Bishop Howell as well as our Chairman Johnson and Secretary Simon for inviting me to this conversation. As they acknowledged earlier, I'm from Wisconsin, so most of you are Minnesotans. But anyhow, I think, in terms of being civically engaged, it is certainly significant from the standpoint that we need to, as individuals, make sure our elected officials know that we're holding them accountable. One of the things that I love to say is that we should find opportunities where we can show up to meetings, where we can, for example, as a parent, you should go to the school board meetings. You should make sure school board members know that you're paying attention to the decisions that they're making as it relates to your children. Additionally, though, when Bishop Howell talked about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and Bishop Johnson mentioned about the significance of now what's going on in our country and the importance of us being engaged. There's a saying that says, if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. And so one of the things that I've learned is that it's true that if you don't get engaged, if you don't speak up, if you don't say anything, then you leave decision makers at the table making decisions and not considering your perspective. And not only do they, you give them a chance to consider your perspective by showing up and letting them know that you're paying attention, but it also opens up the opportunity for you to participate in different commissions. Your name may come up and you can get involved in other activities and decision-making tables that are open in your community.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Hopefully, if you're listening and you have not felt the urge or the push to be engaged outside of even voting, hopefully that was enough to kind of light some fire and, get you to move, because it's so very, very important that we have our voices in spaces in which it truly matters, that are making decisions for ourselves and our families. So thank you so much for sharing, everyone. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some questions I'm sure that a lot of folks are wondering about. So some of these, I'm going to direct some of these questions back to you, Secretary Simon. So let's see here. We already know about the presidential the presidential election. What are some of the other offices that are going to be on the ballot?
Yeah, so let me just speak for a second, Minnesota specific here. So in Minnesota, we have a feature on our website, and that website is mnvotes.org, mnvotes.org. And it's a feature that allows you to see what's on your ballot. So you can just type in your address, and up will come all the contests. So if you don't know, hey, are we voting on county commissioner this year? Are we voting on school board? I don't know if this is a year we're electing a mayor or whatever the office. You can know not only which offices, but which candidates, and have links to their websites, which is great. But in Minnesota, at least, the common elections that all of us will vote on are President of the United States, obviously. There's a United States Senate seat. Tina Smith is the incumbent. She's running for re-election. There's some judicial races. A lot of people overlook those, backside of the ballot, but there's a Supreme Court contest, Court of Appeals, judges, things like that. And then depending on where you live, it varies. One thing for sure, wherever you live, there will be in Minnesota, there will be a race for United States House of Representatives, wherever you live. Wherever you live, there will be a Minnesota State House race, a Minnesota State Senate race, and then the others depend on where you live. There may or may not be county commissioner or school board or mayor or some of those other offices. The offices that are not on the ballot are Secretary of State, Governor, Attorney General, State Auditor. Yeah, right. It's not to be on the ballot, I can tell you. But those offices are done in the non-presidential year. So really, mnvotes.org, and you can find what's on your ballot in your neighborhood.
So that's mnvotes.org, everyone. And we did pin that in the comments section. So feel free to check that out. It has a plethora of information on there for you to do further research on those that are on your ballot, find your polling location, and all of that. Okay, another question for you, Secretary Simon. Your office does so many amazing things and a lot of great work. What are some ways that your office has made voting more accessible in marginalized communities?
So this is something I'm very proud of. There's always work to do, okay? But, and we have work to do in Minnesota. There's no question about that. So, I like to say that, Minnesota is #1 overall in voter turnout in America in 2018 and 2016. So folks, we're going for the three-peat. We're going for the third in a row. But as proud as I am to say that, and I never fail to say it, let's zoom out a little bit and look. Not every community, either geographic or demographic community, is voting at sky-high levels. Some are, some aren't. Overall, we're #1. But that doesn't mean we don't have work to do. We do. So to your question, let me start with one thing that I'm particularly proud of. We have more than doubled the number of non-English languages that we serve. When I came in, it was 5. Now we're up to 12. It was 11. We just added American Sign Language. So we're at 12. And that's really meaningful to me personally, because you heard me earlier talk about my great-grandparents who came to this country. That was on my father's side. On my mother's side, she was an immigrant. So I'm first-generation American on that side. And I know what it's like to grow up in a household with someone whose native language is not English. I know that need for official documents, government documents, to be in a language that we're more comfortable with. So that's something that has really helped us hit the ground running with all sorts of communities, New Americans in particular. And then there's just really forging relationships in other communities, demographically and geographically, where you know that there's room to grow. And that takes time. You can't just come around at election time and say, hey, yeah, we're here to tell you to vote. You can't do that. People can sort of see through that, really. And so it's been very important to us to be engaged as an office, not just me, but others in our office and our voter outreach team in communities all over, communities of color, other communities, both geographic and demographic. And that's a real commitment. When I say that we want to make voting as easy as possible for every eligible Minnesotan, that means every eligible Minnesotan, no matter where they came from, no matter where they are now, no matter their life circumstances. And that means doing hard work, not just like 2 months before the election, but year-round, every month, all the time. So that we're proud of those efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your hard work in those areas. And as we know, there's definitely more work that we all can do and that we're all going to continue to do. Question for everyone. So I want to open this up to everyone here. As we know, we're in the middle of a pandemic and there are several different options to vote, right? Which way, if you don't mind sharing, which way are you planning to vote and why? So I can start with, let's see, Lady Erica.
I intend to vote in person. I just love the fact that I know that my vote is going to make it in to be counted. So I'm going to go the traditional way and vote in person.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's go over to Bishop Johnson.
Well, thank you very much. I plan to put on gloves, a mask, and squirt hand sanitizer all over me and go stand in line. Not only am I interested in voting in person, but I am also interested in voting early. I'm interested in voting early beforehand due to the fact that we have the ability to do so, number one. Number two, I want to ensure that our vote is done and I can focus in on helping and assisting others to get them to the polls so they may be able to vote as well. And my vote would have already been passed and being populated already.
That's awesome. So he said he's going to get his done early so that he can focus on everyone else. I love it. All right, Bishop Howell.
I'm going to wear a mask to the voting poll. I'm going to wear a Minnesota Vikings mask, by the way, as I go to the poll. Let me just make that very clear. And also, however, we're going to take bandfuls of individuals from our church, and we're going to vote early, as Bishop Johnson indicated. And every Sunday right now, leading up to voting time, we are going to take a political issue and preach it on the pulpit, speak on the pulpit, to give people an understanding why it's necessary to vote. Once they hear the issue, it is not our place to endorse any candidates, but it is our place to present the issues, and here's why you need to vote. And then we're going to choose a day, not that voting day on that Tuesday, but we're going to choose an earlier day and take as many people as we possibly can, not just from our ministry, but also from the community, take them to the polls and vote in person.
Awesome. Thank you, Bishop Howell. Minister Black.
Amen. I'm cheering on those physically distanced van fools. Amen. I am going to follow Bishop Johnson and vote early and in person with my mask, gloves, sanitizer, and all.
Awesome. And I'm planning to vote absentee. So with that being said, Secretary Simon, can you talk about the different options for voting and just kind of the processes for them? So there are, I can list them as well, or you can go ahead and list them. But I know we have early voting, we have early absentee, we have early in person. We also have same day voting, of course, going in. And we also have curbside voting. So I think I hit all of them, right? Mm-hmm. If I haven't, then I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
No,
so if you can talk about the processes, that'll be great.
You got it. Those are like the sort of three legs to the stool, you might think of it. And we've heard about it. One is in-person voting on game day on November 3rd in your neighborhood polling place. That's number one. Number two is in-person absentee voting. And that period started September 18th. So we're in it in Minnesota right now. We are in it. So any weekday, anytime the office is open, and if you're not sure where to go for that, it's different than your polling place. If you're not sure where to go for that, again, our website, mnvotes.org, and you can find out where to go, it's typically a county or city building. So that's number 2. And number 3, and I'll say what I'm doing, I'm going to vote from home. I'm going to vote by absentee from home. That's something that we're asking folks to take a look at this year. Now, look, every method is just as legitimate as the other. But, you know, given COVID, given the 1,000-to-1 ratio that we have in Minnesota versus people at polling places, we want to try to get that number down. And it's a win-win. Those who vote from home are making it a little bit easier for those who go to the polling place. They get the comfort and convenience at home, and they get the benefit of making sure the numbers go down at the polling place. But you mentioned something very interesting, Sarah, and I'm glad you did, which is curbside voting. I would lump that in with game day polling place voting, because it is game day polling place, but it's what it sounds like. You can, in Minnesota, curbside vote, meaning you can say, hey, I want the election judges to bring the ballot to my vehicle. You don't have to be driving. You can be a passenger. It's best if you call ahead. You can show up. They can't deny you, but it's probably best just for everyone's smooth running of the polling place. But either way, if you are a voter with a disability or not, you can just, there's no requirement of that, or just you want to do it because you want to do it. You can have them bring the ballot out to you at your vehicle. And those are all great ways to vote. Just do it. Make sure you do it, preferably early, I would say, but make sure that you do it.
And just a quick follow-up with that, for those that may not be able to get out and get to the polls, and they don't, and maybe they request their ballot to come home, and then they're like, oh, I didn't get it in enough time. What's the cutoff time for sending in your ballot? And also, can I hand my ballot off to someone for them to deliver it as well?
Thank you. Love the question. Thank you. So this year, we've got a new rule in place just for this year. It's a 2020 special, no other year but this year. This year, if you get your ballot by mail at home and you want to mail it back, you can mail it as late as Election Day. If it's postmarked by Election Day, you're good to go as long as it arrives by 7 days later on Tuesday, November 10th. If it arrives on Wednesday, the 11th, it's not good. It will be spoiled. It will not be counted. But that means every person in Minnesota has an automatic 7-day cushion built in. So it can never be less than 7 days. You send it in as late as Tuesday, November 3rd, as long as it gets there by the 10th. Now, some folks might say, hey, look, I'm hearing about postal delays. That even a week makes me nervous. That's fine. You can send it Monday. You can send it Saturday. You can send it a week early or 2 weeks early or tomorrow if you have the ballot already. And then one other thing, you didn't ask this, but I got to sneak it in, which is that just because you received the ballot by mail doesn't mean that's the way you got to return it. We've had for decades the option of just hand delivering it back. That's not new for this year. You can hand deliver it to your city or county election office. That address will be in the materials that you order, or better yet, in most cases, you can hand it off to someone you know and trust to hand deliver it for you. So if the mail's making you a little nervous, that's one other option too.
Thank you so much, because I feel like a lot of us, there's been a lot of, conspiracy theories and myths and things being thrown around, and just some clarity, to get kind of through the fog. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like a lot of folks may not have known that. This next question I'm going to direct to Bishop Howell. So for those that are the Christian faith and just believers and just people in general, right? How do we stay balanced? How do we stay balanced in the midst of this crazy political climate?
Well, certainly we are people of faith, and certainly we have heard so much this year. We've experienced so much this year, and it has really impacted so many families across this nation in our communities. With the social unrest, racism, as it's discussed, I think Tuesday night's debate really helped us all to understand the direction of how the country may be going towards. And I think that many of us have been such emotionally touched by the pandemics of all kinds this year. As far as the church is concerned, many of us are hurting right now. Many of us have lost loved ones to the pandemic. Many of us are suffering today in the church. Many of us have had to undertake and gone through economic issues that is unbelievable. Well, we're not endorsing anybody, but we are saying this, that by God's help, we know that He is a protector. He does sustain our wealth and our health. We do know that. And therefore, with a good conscience, I think that this has provided us a greater motivation why we're going to vote, our conscience and our convictions because suffering is not acceptable in this community. That is not acceptable, whether it be education, whether it be health, whether it be social, and also religious. We have a right to say and do something about that. So from a faith community, we have hope. We're not losing any hope at all. But we do know that with that hope has to come faith and works to make it happen.
Awesome. Faith and works. Would anyone else like to chime in on that question? How do we stay balanced during this very crazy, very, very crazy political climate? Anyone else like to speak to that? I will call you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to be that teacher like, no, you. Nevertheless, yes, that is faith without works is dead, as we know. So we have to put action behind what we believe if we truly believe it, right? And so I'm with you on that, Bishop. So Minister Black, specifically for newer voters that are kind of on the cusp of trying to figure out, do I want to vote or not? It's not going to do anything. You know, that feel that way, that aren't completely bought or sold on the idea that voting truly matters. What will you tell them?
I would tell them voting does accomplish something, and that many a race has been won or lost based on a very small number and percentage of voters. And what you don't want to have happen is waking up on the day after the election and seeing those numbers start to come in and recognize that, wait a minute, the person I did or didn't want to be elected is, and that margin was so small that it could have been the difference between me casting my vote or not casting my vote, my group of friends and I casting my votes or not, that none of us want to have that regret of what if I was in that number and I could have done something, but I didn't. I stayed home. I could have gone ahead and cast that absentee vote that I had sitting here on the kitchen table, but I just let it sit here and decided not to turn it in. I could have went ahead and read that pamphlet on people who were running for office, candidates from the League of Women Voters, and found out where candidates stood, but I chose to just, mark whoever's name sounded like maybe it was one that I knew, instead of actually finding out where different candidates stood as it relates to where my priorities were. None of us want to be in that position. So I want to encourage each and every person out there, don't think that your vote doesn't matter. Your vote absolutely matters. We know that from the statistics. And more than that, and this, when you're young, often it sounds like, oh, that's just old people talking, but people did pay a price for us to be here, for us to have the right to vote. People are still paying the price for us to have the right to vote. And indeed, there are many states where many people, including this one, are not allowed the right to vote, whether that is because they are formerly incarcerated, whether that is for a number of reasons, and they are wishing that they have the opportunity that you have to vote. My own child, who is just 9 years old, sat in front of the entire debate the other night, hollering at the TV, wishing she had the right to cast that vote. So each one of us want to take that right as seriously as we can for each and every office that is on that ballot and make an informed decision. Because again, we don't want to wake up that next day and wish that we had regrets, or a year from now or 2 years from now and wish that we used the power of that vote to the very best of our ability.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bishop Howell.
Yes, Sarah, could I ask Secretary Simon a question?
Absolutely.
Some pushback we received at the Electoral College versus the popular vote. And many are asking, why vote if the Electoral College is going to determine the outcome in the long run?
Wow, that is a great question. I have lots of complicated thoughts about that. I could go off for an hour just on that. Like, I strongly support reforming the Electoral College to make sure that the winner of the national popular vote always wins the office of president, period. I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican, that's the right thing to do. But that's not our system right now. It's the Electoral College. So to your question, what do you do? I think it's about punching through. I think it's about punching through and getting through. I think it's about you play by the rules as they are right now, as faulty as they may be, and as flawed as they may be, and as much change as they may deserve. And you play by the rules right now, and that means you might have to get up a little earlier. You might have to work a little harder. It might take your candidate winning by a lot more than he or she should. right? I mean, we have examples now of people losing the popular vote and becoming president. So maybe it's like, you need to surge. It's not enough to win by a little. You got to win by a lot. You got to work hard. You got to get up earlier. You got to stay up later. You got to work harder. You got to get less sleep. And maybe that's the way it's got to be until we're in a position to change the rules so that they are right within democracy. So I would just say it's about punching through, getting through, use the rules that exist right now so that you can change them into something that's more just for everybody. I have an opinion on what those rules would be, but that wasn't the question.
Well, you definitely have the floor to share that if you would,
Yes.
if you would like. Definitely.
Yes.
God, you're gonna have to stop me. No, I won't hog the time, but honestly, so here's the deal. Here's what I support. I support this thing called the National Popular Vote Movement. And if you go to nationalpopularvote.org, you can see what it's all about. And here's the premise. The premise is the Constitution says we're going to have this thing called the Electoral College. I don't know why they called it that, but whatever. It's called the Electoral College. And every state gets a bunch of points that they can allocate. And the Constitution is silent as to how to allocate them. It just so happens right now, 48 out of 50 states, including all the states on this call, happen to have a winner-take-all rule. If you win our state by one vote, you get all the marbles, you get everything, right? So all of Minnesota's 10 electoral votes. So you don't have to get rid of the Electoral College to have what I think is the just result. The number one vote getter wins. What you can do is say, look, we're going to allocate our votes to the winner of the national popular vote. Under the Constitution, it's silent. It says, states, you decide. You give away those points any way you want. So, for example, in Minnesota, I know I'm trying to give a dumb example to illustrate the point. If Minnesota wanted to, we could say, we're giving away our 10 electoral votes every year to the tallest candidate. That's a dumb idea, but constitutional. The Constitution just says, you got points, give them away however you want. If we wanted to say, we are going to give away our points, our electoral votes to the person with the most letters in their last name. Dumb idea, but totally okay under the Constitution. Same thing. We could say as a state, and other states could band together and say, we're giving our votes to the winner of the national popular vote. That would ensure every time that the person who gets the most votes, just like every other office under the sun, Secretary of State, Governor, U.S. Senator, school board, whatever, top voter getter gets the job. Why shouldn't it be for the most powerful person in our country and in the world? And so that's it in a nutshell. I'll shut myself up. I love this subject. I could go on and on and on, but I think that's most fair.
Yeah, we have to have you back, Secretary Simon. I think you're on to something there. I definitely think you're on to something. All right, so we only have about 10 minutes. So I do have so many more questions that we have prepared here. But what I want to make sure that we also hit is who's eligible to vote, Secretary Simon, and what do we need to actually vote?
Yeah, so eligibility, there's four main things. Are you 18? Are you a citizen of the United States? Are you a resident of Minnesota? And sadly, are you currently serving a felony sentence, even on paper? And I just want to tag along what others have said. We got to change that law. It's high time. It's way past time. If you've left prison behind, you need to have your right to vote back. It's the right, fair, just thing to do. But for now, those are the rules. Those four things, basically. As for what you need to register to vote, let me just break it down in a simple way. You know, getting away from this or that document or whatever. Two major things you got to show to register to vote. Pretty simple. You are who you say you are, and you live where you say you live. That's it. That's the whole game. That's the whole deal. You are who you say you are. You live where you say you live. And you can accomplish either of those things in multiple ways. In Minnesota, I can't speak for the other states, we have a very long, generous list. It's way beyond just driver's license or state ID card. It's a long list. It can be financial statements. It can be a utility bill. It can be all sorts of things. We even have something in Minnesota called vouching. Vouching means, what if, I'll give the example of my own family. In 1998, my parents downsized. After my sister and I were out of the house, they downsized, moved to a condo, and my parents moved in late October. Not only did they not have a driver's license showing that address, they didn't even have a utility bill yet. So my dad, my mom wasn't a citizen, but my dad used something called vouching that we have in Minnesota, where you can get your neighbor, someone who lives in your precinct, to vouch for you. They sign an oath under penalty of perjury. Their name is taken down as someone who's vouching for someone, and they vouch that you, for example, live where you say you live. So we have, and my dad couldn't have voted in that governor's election had his neighbor not vouched for him. So you got that too. Bottom line is we have a very generous long list of ways you can do both of those things. Show you are who you say you are, including a canceled driver's license, including an out-of-state one from Kentucky or New York or California or whatever. That's not good for you live where you say you live, obviously, but it is good for you are who you say you are. So it's those two things, pretty simple. And fortunately in Minnesota, long list for each of those things. And if you are wondering what those things are, go to mnvotes.org and you'll see those long lists.
Awesome. Lady Erica Young, do you know what that looks like in Wisconsin?
In terms of your when you show up to the voting polls, you show up and they typically just ask you your name, and then after they've asked you your name, they'll look on the list whether or not you're there, what your address is, and then you'll get your ballot and you can vote.
Awesome.
Can I clarify something?
Absolutely.
That was a great answer that we just heard from Lady Young. The answer I gave to your question was about voter registration. In terms of voting, ditto to what she just said. There is no photo ID requirement, anything. You can walk in with empty pockets to the polling place in Minnesota. Just say your name, and it's the same procedure. What I was referring to was to register to vote.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. All right, so our time is winding up here. I have a few more questions, but I'm actually going to open the conversation up. We do have one question in the chat box that we'll jump in really quickly here, and then I'll open it up to the panelists to for any final remarks or any other questions that maybe you have for Secretary Simon or anything of that sort. But before we get there, question in the chat box reads, what are our churches doing about getting our young voters to the polls? And that's specific to the MWWDC. So I think that should be directed to Bishop Howell and Bishop Johnson.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the question. Thank you very, very much. Every church really needs to have a political discussion in their home assemblies. And I encourage all pastors to use a given day or a night, whatever is suitable for the congregation, and discuss politics and voting, but primarily discuss the issues that are impacting our congregations. I think it should be a very rigid and organized discussion and give everyone an opportunity to express their opinions on any given subject, and then come behind and say, this is why we need a vote. And pastors, I appeal to all of you, please take advantage of this season. We may not have another season like this one again, where we are making an all-out effort for all pastors to encourage their congregations to vote. Our young people, I believe I don't know how it is in each state, but in Minnesota, we can vote at 18 years old. And I'm not sure what the voting age is in Wisconsin, South Dakota, or North Dakota. I should know that, but I'm sorry. But every young person, they should have a dedicated evening just to talk about why it's necessary to vote, and it is their God-given responsibility to do so. I can't think of another way to encourage our young people, but I think the church can take a more active role than it has in the past to really encourage all of them to vote, and make this a real dynamic time.
Thank you, Bishop Howell. Bishop Johnson?
Thank you, Bishop Howell, for your comments. I would like to say that we are in a really challenging season. COVID-19 has forced us to make adjustments and change, but this season we are in allows us the choice to change. And our voting is important for us to choose to bring forth change. COVID pushed us to have to change, and we wasn't ready for the change. But our vote calls us to be able to bring change in our local community. As we look to bringing young people to the polls and encouraging them, I think it's important for us to have real conversations. One, to educate young people. Number two, to provide accessibility for them to be able to get there, and to help them make the right decision for the issues in which plague the church and plague their local communities. I believe that the young people haven't had the opportunity to engage themselves in the mass numbers to properly educate themselves about what is going to happen and what voting really will do, not only for the next 4 years, but for a time period that will affect generations to come. So I think it's important that we really focus in on educating the next generation as we assist them to get them to the polls. That'll be important for our young people.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I also want to open this question up to Minister Black and Lady Young as well.
Absolutely. I would echo the comments that have been shared. I also would say that all of this starts at home. So if you're not having conversations at home already, start having those conversations. Again, about all offices, about any votes that you might have in your communities. We don't want to take for granted any ballot issues that might be taking place in your communities. COVID-19 is impacting our children significantly. And many school boards are having elections on November 3rd as well. So if you don't know who is running for school board and you don't know where those leaders stand on education, if they have not got a specific racial equity platform that says where they stand on education and how they'll allocate resources related to all of the impacts on our kids right now, knowing that many of our kids are not getting a quality education, then you're already failing. And you should be talking about that at your dinner table, in your pulpit, at your church, during Sunday school. You should be making sure that you're addressing that, because that has impact both on our kids and on parents' ability to go to work or to not be able to go to work and provide for their families, knowing that more than 50% of African Americans have been unemployed since March this year because of COVID-19. If we're not addressing those issues through the election ballots, then we're in trouble. The same with Hennepin County elections and Ramsey County elections. If we're not thinking about those things and being informed about where these candidates stand on our issues, and we're only paying attention to the presidential election, we have already failed. So please make sure that you're getting informed about who is running for every single office. Our judges' elections, most of them, if not all of them, I think in Minnesota right now, for those of us locally, are running unopposed, but you should still know where they stand on the issues that are most important to you and take meaningful action.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Lady Young.
I think that one of the barriers in terms of at times of getting young people out is helping them to understand the connection between the political position or place that they're voting for and their actual everyday life. And so I would say to bring out that point is, I recently heard someone who said, I don't vote for the president because I don't think the president impacts my life. And so one of the things that I thought about was, right now we have, as we all know, a Supreme Court seat that just came open by the death of Supreme Court Justice Bader Ginsburg. And so people need to understand that decisions, for example, on the Supreme Court impact your everyday life. When you talk about, as many of you know, I'm in law school. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and today, as a matter of fact, my topic was racial profiling, the laws that were set in place that permitted racial profiling. The President of the United States is the person who helps to appoint the person who becomes the next Supreme Court justice. And so we need to understand, and I think it's important and vital for us to help our young people understand, when people are sitting in those positions of power, such as the presidency, what is his power and how does his decisions or the decisions that he make impact me on an everyday level? And certainly communities of color certainly should be engaged at understanding those things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And just super quickly here, we do have a question, another question in the chat box. I know we have to wrap up here. Question is, I just received my mail-in ballot, but one of my return envelopes with my information pre-printed out on it has my house number wrong. How do I fix this problem?
Very interesting. That's an unusual one, if that's a house number wrong. It shouldn't impact the result. In other words, it came to you, you're sending it back. As long as what matches up is your personal identifying information that you supplied, it could be the last four of a social or driver's license or whatever. As long as that matches up and as long as you sign the ballot, you should be good to go. I'd be shocked if it had any impact on like rejecting that ballot. But if you want to be sure, I would call your local city elections office. It's usually the city clerk, and just say, I just want to make absolutely sure. But it would be extremely unusual. So I think you're good to go, is the bottom line.
Thank you. One more question that we have from someone in the chat box. Texas recently stated that they will be removing ballot drop-off box down to 1 box per district. Will any of this be happening in Minnesota?
No, it won't be, fortunately. Drop boxes are a place where you can hand deliver that ballot, like I was talking about earlier. And now counties and cities have the option to do it. They don't have to have drop boxes, but more and more are doing it this year because more and more people are voting by mail and voting from home. So it's up to them. There's no way Governor Walz would ever do what the governor of Texas just did today, which said, nope, you can only have 1 per county. If a county wants to do 100, great. If a city wants to do 100, I know Minneapolis is doing a lot, St. Paul, other areas, that's great. There is no effort, absolutely, that will get any ground in Minnesota to do anything like that.
Thank you for clarifying those things. I just wanted to add in one more thing when we were referring to young voters. Me being 28 years old, I'm a millennial. I have a brother, he's 19, he's a Gen Zer. We have very, very interesting conversations about the political climate. Nevertheless, I just wanted to remind young people out there, because what's transpiring is the fact that young people are not necessarily voting on a party. They're voting on policy. They're voting on what an elected is actually going to do. It's no longer, back in the day, it's like, oh, okay, I'm a person of color, or I'm Black, so I'm going to vote all blue, or I'm whatever, I'm going to vote all. It's not, this is a different day and a different age. And so specifically, I also think that electeds have to truly value the young voter and take the time to listen to them. And not take their vote for granted, because they are watching them so closely when it comes to policy and when it comes to these issues. They are extremely engaged. You can see that in the streets. You can see that in protests. They are extremely engaged. And so I think even when it comes to the church in particular, us taking the time, as everyone was stating, taking the time to educate our young people and give them the resources that they need to do their research, because they'll do the research. It's just being that connector and that bridger for the information, like these sort of panels and discussions that we have, and truly listening to them, because as we know, historically, the Black church has been, not just a spiritual beacon in our communities, but also a very, we've always been civically engaged as a people. We've always, that's always been something that's been, the center of who we are, because we've had to be, because most times, society is not in our favor as it is in today. So if you want things to stop happening, you want something to look different, it is important for you to vote. All right. And so make sure that you visit mnvotes.org. It has so much information on there, as Secretary Simon has stated, about eligibility, the process of voting absentee, voting in person, finding your polling location, and so many other things. I tell you, you couldn't tell me that I would have been working in politics or anything like this 5 years ago, or even when I was in high school, but here I am. So while I'm here and I have a platform, that's what we're doing. And thank you everyone for using your platform, for such a great cause, and to truly empower and enlighten our people. So I'm actually going to hand it back over to, I'm going to actually start with, let's go with Lady Young, and give your final remarks.
I just say, remember, when you think about whether or not you should exercise your right to vote, the privilege that comes along with it, the sacrifices that have been made for you to have the right to vote. Also remember how important it is as you go to the polls. Remember how important it is and significant it is when you think about the fact that the 1964 Civil Rights Act had to be passed so that people were not disenfranchised from the right to vote. So take that, value that, and exercise the right.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to Minister Black.
I would echo all of that. And let's get souls to the polls.
Absolutely. Let's get souls. I love that. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt or on a mask.
I will honor that I stole it from my pastor.
If anyone doesn't know, that would be Bishop Johnson. You see the big smile on his face. All right. And then let's go ahead and go over to Bishop Johnson.
I would like to say that we have an opportunity to bring real civic change. And I speak not only to those that have been challenged by the trajectory of the issues, but I speak to our young people. I speak to every pastor that is watching by way of Facebook and social media. I speak to your heart. I speak to community leaders today. And I ask you to do all that you can do to get every individual to the polls. It may be by any choice, by any opportunity, but I'm looking forward to every person taking the real advantage in voting. Today is our opportunity to learn more and make change in our community and in our country. We look for you to step up to the plate and bring real change by making your vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Johnson. Secretary Simon.
Yeah, I want to just say a word to that person out there, maybe not on this call, hopefully not on this call, who's on the fence about voting. They don't know whether they're going to or not. And maybe the reason they don't know is because they're pretty disillusioned. They're pretty disgusted by politics, by politicians, by campaigns, by broken promises, by a system that they think doesn't work for them and doesn't deliver for them. And they're sick of it. And the reason they're thinking of not voting isn't because they don't know where to find the info. They know about mnvotes.org. They know where to turn. They can turn to church. They can turn to government. They can find out the rules. They're not voting because they are disillusioned or even disgusted. And maybe they're even thinking that they will withhold their vote as a way to send a message about a system or about people or candidates that they don't support and they don't want to lend their name to it. And I get that. I get that feeling. I get that impulse. We've all felt it. I bet everyone on this panel has felt it, even if just for a minute. I have, and I'm Secretary of State. I felt it. But I can't put it any better than the words I once saw on a T-shirt at a parade, actually. And the T-shirt said, "Failure to vote is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of surrender." I like that a lot. You may think you're striking a blow for a cause by not voting. You're sending a message. You're not. You're giving up. You're surrendering something of value. Don't do it, especially in this very important year.
Wow. I have to write that down. Bishop Howe.
Yes, VOTE. Let me use the old church way of saying it. Victory over the enemy. VOTE. Victory over the enemy. The enemy is apathy. Get out and vote.
Simple as that, everyone. Get out and vote. All right. Do not surrender. All right. Get out to vote. Let your voice be heard. This has been an awesome panel, an awesome hour. Hopefully you were able to take something away from this discussion and that's helpful for you during this voting season. Make sure you share this Facebook Live with other people that need to hear this information. Don't hold all of this to yourself. Make sure you share it and get this information out to everyone. We want to make sure everyone's voice is heard. And shameless plug, make sure you do your census. Make sure you are counted because we want to make sure that the resources are going to the communities that they need to be going to and all that jazz. Don't get me started on the census. Nevertheless, thank you so much, panel. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to be your moderator. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.